I haven't been sleeping. I haven't been in 1,000 islands for 3 months. See, our question is, well, when are you going to do something about it? His question is, when are you going to do something about it? You're a king of the earth. You're my son. You can go forward and bring peace and righteousness and joy into people's lives. I'm not going to overthrow Nebuchadnezzar. What did Daniel do? I mean, that's a great book to look at, and look at how a guy brings the citizenship of heaven on this earth. And it's not by rebellion unless the king tells him, don't pray. Well, we got a problem here. I'm going to pray. Or unless you bow down and worship that statue. Can't. It's idolatry. I have no other gods before me. Give me something else to do and I'll do it. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Eat this food. Not the best way forward. He prays and he develops a plan for moving forward so he doesn't have to submit to a diet that he knows is unhealthy. The temple of the Holy Spirit. We have presidents. This will just kind of, I think, almost seal it. In Matthew 20, it's the parable of all the guys that go to work all day long, and then at the end of the day, the landowner, vine dresser, whatever he is, he pays the guys at the end of the day the same amount that he paid at the beginning of the day, which the guys at the end of the day are like, wow, is this what they mean by grace? Is this what grace is about? Wow, I get this. The guys at the beginning of the day, they don't see it the same way. They find this very unfair that somebody could show up late in the afternoon and make the same amount of money that I made in the morning. And the question is, but that's what you agreed to. What's your problem? Verse 15.
Am I not lawfully permitted to do what I choose with what is mine? Or is your eye envious because I am generous?
It does have a way of shutting us up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can I do what I want with what's mine? And the real question is, why are you upset with me if everybody's going to be saved in the end? If my love and grace and generosity is that great, that somehow I can make a way for everybody, why are you so upset? Don't you have an aunt or an uncle or somebody who's died without Christ that you wished you would see and live in eternity with? That's a provocative question. Why are you angry with my generosity? Because that's what hits in this parable. The point of the end of the parable, as Jesus is presenting, is, can't I do what I want with what's mine? Mm-hmm. And we're going to end up in Romans 13. Remember, Jesus before Pilate makes a profound statement. You have no power. And the word's authority, actually. Exousia in the Greek. You have no authority. You imagine how that must have driven Pilate nuts? You have no authority but what I've given you. I can say whatever I need to say now to walk out the door. Who do you think is in charge here? And I'll take it a step further. You are only on this earth because God thought it was a good idea to give you life on this planet through whoever your parents were. He's telling Pilate, basically. Whatever you got has been given to you by me. You have no power except what you've been given. The third area is who Paul was actually writing to, the Roman church, which we've kind of said a few things here and there. But it was the actual letter was written in 58, which was 5 years after the Roman government had it to here with the Jews. They just had it. And they threw all the Jews out. They banished them from Rome, which included the Christians, because as far as the Romans were concerned, Christians were a Jewish sect. They didn't know what you were talking about. A follower of Jesus Christ. He was a Jew, wasn't he? Carpenter. So they all get thrown out of Rome. The reason's fascinating, though, because the Jews were a pain in the neck. They were seditious. They did not like being under Roman authority, and they made it clear. But it wasn't just because they didn't like being under Roman authority and their rules and all that kind of stuff. They didn't like being under Roman authority because they didn't believe the Romans had any authority. That the Jews, this is their world. All the Jews are the ones that should be calling the shots. We should be under Jewish authority and government, not Roman. I don't honor or respect your authority. You're a pagan. You're an unbeliever. You're a Gentile, whatever words you want to use. And I'm not. I'm a son of the king. That's what Paul is writing. Let me sort you boys out. Let me get you to understand how they got in control, the Roman Empire, and who's actually in control, and who authority was birthed by, and when, and the whole thing. Paul's sorting out something. He's sorting out a problem. If you keep rebelling against authority, you're rebelling against God, go read the Old Testament. Watch what happens when you rebel against God. They're not beautiful pictures. I look at it and I think, well, as you're looking at what's going on and what ended up happening to our brothers and sisters during that time, it was like damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, you're like in a no-win situation. It's kind of the way I see it sometimes. It's like a no-win situation. And God's like, I'm not particularly into winning. We're winning. We're going to be winners once again. Forget it. Forget the whole winning concept. Let's get on with the witnessing concept. What should we look like? Like Peter says, what manner of people ought we to be? And I think Romans 13 now becomes kind of apparent. But let's read the first 4 together because they kind of go together nicely.
Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, the powers that are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil.
My nephew Don is a police officer, and a really good one. If I was going to get arrested, I'd want to get arrested by him. But the Romans 13, he's very, very clear that God has raised him up to be a police officer and given him the authority. He wears a badge that gives him the authority. His job is to take care of you and I. That's what he does. And you can do that in a respectful, honoring way, even though people are dishonoring and disrespecting you and the law and everything else. There's a way of dealing with it. There's a way of being, if you would. And he's the first one to stand in line and say, I don't walk around on the streets looking for people to harass. But I tell you this, if you break the law, you're going to have a problem, because that's why God's placed me here. Now, the Romans 13, the main thing Paul's trying to get across is he's looking at a bunch of people and saying, you got banished from Rome 5 years ago for not honoring authority, for not honoring God. So what do you think? You're going to keep doing that? That's more where Paul's coming in from, not this concept of majoring on God puts people in offices, positions. I mean, he does. Right now, Queen Elizabeth has been on the throne only because she was born in that bloodline. God birthed her, put her in that family in England, in a monarchy. Has everything she's done been of God? Probably not. I doubt it. Maybe. But God had a purpose in birthing her. By the way, this word ordained is a military term that just says basically a general of an army puts his people where he will to accomplish what he needs to accomplish. That's what he does. And God has established a system of authority, and he's placed his people. The fascinating thing, because I've heard people say this about Romans 13 before, almost in the context of voting. Well, if God's going to make the president of the United States who he wants to be president anyway, what am I voting for? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you ask me who I want and then say, I was just wondering, I'm going to make him president? Interesting concept, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible? Is that what's going to happen in November? Are we going to all go out and vote or not or whatever? And it's not going to make a difference anyway, because God's going to make who he wants to be president of the United States. But if you are on places where there's a lot of rage, you have to be blind as a bat not to think that it's going to impact you, because we absorb these things. The number one expression, rage. This guy, Edward Wasserman, who's the dean of the Graduate School of Journalism at Berkeley, writes in this Scientific American magazine, mainstream media have made a fortune teaching people the wrong ways to talk to each other, offering up Jerry Springer, Crossfire, Bill O'Reilly. People understandably conclude rage is the political vernacular, that this is how public ideas are talked about. Question, so is that the way we engage ourselves? And I also, as I was reading that this last week, I was thinking, and I don't really care quite, I seriously don't, so please, I don't want to be misunderstood, but Trump got off the ground fueling a lot of rage and anger. And I happen to think that he knows exactly what he's doing in that respect. And he did tap into something in the American people that was already there, that frustration has gone beyond being frustrated. I mean, talking about my health insurance earlier, I'm frustrated. I can go from frustration to anger if I want to go down that road. Anger can become rage. I mean, there is kind of like a progression, but there's been something that I sense has been absolutely a spirit of lawlessness that has been released, not Donald Trump, but just in general. I don't think it started with this, with this last administration, the one that we're in. It's not the birth of it, but it certainly has used certain techniques, like you say, and using certain principles and ideas, how you get from point A to point B to accomplish your own purposes, whatever, that whole thing. I don't know how much study you guys have done on authority, but if you think of like a house, what the mom and dad allow in the house is the rule of the house. They're the authorities. That's the whole thing about a man and woman leaving their parents and establishing their own house, because they've got to establish their own authority and lead the kind of lives that will birth other lives into that thing. And you can't do that under your parents' roof. That's all about authority. That's what that whole thing is about. When you've got the authority in any situation, I don't care what, it can be in a schoolroom, it can be in a donut shop, I don't care where it is. There's an established authority, and what that authority agrees to and allows will become the rule, because that's why they're there. That's why God established authority. Romans 13, what we're going to be talking about, appointed, but not in the sense we think of appointed. Anyway, that's the most important thing. And you're right, every person you named by name. But every one of them, we could have just taken their names out and said, but the authority said this, the authority said that. And once you start looking at it that way, now we're dumping personalities. I don't care about Eric Holder or President Obama or anybody. These are the authorities in the judicial system, in the social system, down the line. And when the authorities lead you, what's supposed to be our response? Yeah, the Hebrews 11:13, and then we'll go right into 1 Peter 2:11.
All these died in faith, without receiving the promises, but having seen them, and having welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth.
What a beautiful passage. I mean, it is, but it isn't. It's kind of like, but it is beautiful. So listen, every day I get up, I realize this is not my home. I'm just passing through, doing the best I can in this place. Want to leave it better than I found it. But I'm only a pilgrim here. This is a journey. And in the light of eternity, this kingdom that is from everlasting to everlasting, this is less than a grain of sand on a seashore. Where I came from and where I'm going and the whole thing. But I've got immense responsibility in that little grain of sand. Going to 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 and 12.
Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts, which wage war against the soul. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing in which they slander you as evildoers, they may, on account of your good deeds, as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation.
So he's basically saying, listen, we got this. We understand we have dual citizenship. What does it look like in this world? Look, you've got this country over here that wants you to identify with them, that wants you to feed swine, to be un-Jewish, to be unlike what you actually are. They want to change your identity into what they want it to be. He's very clued up on this whole thing. And he's talking to them about their citizenship. You know, we're pilgrims and the whole thing. But you need to abstain from becoming another citizen than what you actually are. There's like a third citizens group at work here. He continues. Russ, would you continue verses 13 through 17? Because basically it's like Peter's going to let us know, what does this thing look like? I find Peter to be helpful in this respect because the brother got so tamed out from the Peter he was to the Peter he became in the whole thing. You know, I love the brother in that context that he had challenges and he worked through them, and it took him years and years. And yeah, the brother didn't change overnight. You know, it wasn't like they pulled the bing and the light went on and he was as bright as could be. You know, it was like one of those, you know, little by little, day by day. Peter, can I identify with that brother? Verses 13 through 17.
Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority, or to governors as sent by him for the punishment of evildoers and the praise of those who do right. For such is the will of God, that by doing right you may silence the ignorance of foolish men. Act as free men, who do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bondslaves of God. Honor all men, love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king.
It's a tough thing to do when you've got Nero on the throne. Honor him. Are you kidding me? Peter, you have any idea what he's doing? He can only do the things God allows him to do. Really. And unless we know God, we're going to be thrown into a tailspin. He goes on talking about submission. And he also says how it leads to suffering. Hello, church. I don't like to suffer. Nobody does. But you're in a foreign country here, and foreigners, citizens, they hate this stuff. This drives them crazy. The only way they can get rid of it is getting rid of you. Peter knows that. There's suffering involved in submission. Sometimes we submit and it's like, yeah, I like this. For the most part, submitting in situations we don't want to submit to, there's going to be some kind of suffering. I don't like it. Like Rosie used to say when she was a tiny little peanut, 2 years old, I don't like it. It didn't matter if there was something I don't like it. It was so sweet. I feel like that. The thing is with Peter, when you get to his second epistle, you get towards the end of the epistle and he's talking about everything is going to go up in smoke anyway. You know, he gives us a little bit of a glimpse at what's coming. But it's not even getting a hold of that. He asks a question that I just want to finish this section on citizenship. It's the first part of 3, the longest one, by the way, because there's a lot to say about citizenship. But he asks the question in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 11. He says, therefore, since all these things will be dissolved, and I'm putting it in the context of, since this is the way it is, this is the question he asks, what manner of persons ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness? Considering everything we're talking about, so where does that leave you? What kind of a person should you be? What kind of a citizen should you be? Is there a place of being a good citizen and being a good godly citizen, your citizenship from heaven being established on earth? What manner of people ought we to be? It's a provocative question. To me, that is. I don't know, sometimes things hit me, they don't. Because I do feel the Spirit of God actually saying, okay, Steve, so what kind of a person should you be in your generation with all these things that are going on? Your call, Steve. Throws me the ball. Because ultimately, all authority is ordained by God. And every step and word against an authority is a step and a word against what God has set up. We do support laws, not laws that go against God's laws, which we will talk about in weeks to come. When Peter says, you make up your mind. You're telling me I can't preach the gospel. Well, God told me to preach it. Am I supposed to obey God or you? No brainer, I'm obeying God. And they're like, well, he's got a point. So they beat him up and they let him go. Because they got to do something. If an authority tells you to do something in opposition to what God has said, if an authority gives you a gun and says, shoot that guy, no, I'm not going to shoot him. God doesn't want me to shoot him. He's made it clear that I'm not going to shoot anybody and I'm not going to do it. Well, then we're going to shoot you. Well, you got to do what you got to do. But I am not going to pull a trigger on another human being. That's just the way that one. That's the name of that one. But when there are laws of the land to be obeyed and the authorities themselves, I can't change the word of God, to be honest. I don't want to, but I can't. When he says honor the king, where am I supposed to go? Well, let me think. Now, hold on a second. What if the king... It's like, Steve, shut up. I told you, honor the king. So what Steve's really working through is everything that every one of us in this room would say the same thing. But what if the guy is a dirtbag?
But that's not what I was asking.
No, I'm not saying that's what you were asking. What I'm saying is working through that whole issue. And when you have authorities arguing with authorities, that to me is like the epitome of what the kingdoms of this world are about. That's exactly what they do. I've got a good one for you here. I wrote it down. But this hurricane is getting off the ground, and they announce on one of the news programs I was watching that the Clinton campaign, Hillary Clinton, decided to take out a lot of advertising on the Weather Channel because more people will be watching the Weather Channel because of this catastrophe. So she puts her advertising there. Now, the first time I heard it, I was absolutely appalled how anybody could take advantage of a situation when people are in misery is beyond me. Then I hear a guy on the news say, but people are giving her money to be used to campaign, and they're looking for her to use it in the best way possible. And this next week, more people will watch that channel than any other. Now, he didn't use the word good steward, but the Holy Spirit's going, good steward, good steward, good steward, in my ear. What I am posing are the problems. This month's going to be a lot of problems, I'm sure, that where we sit. The good news is this. I don't have to judge her, the situation, or campaign. God hasn't told me to judge her. What I'm saying is it's difficult at times. Looking at a situation with anybody and determining which way am I going to look at it? Which way is a kingdom way? And when we get the place we need to walk is a bit like when Joshua says, are you for us, against us? And the captain of the host says, yes, I'm here. It's like, you didn't answer my question. It's you asked the wrong question. That's where we walk. We're still scratching our heads saying, yes, for us, against us, yes. If we can get through this, then when we read Romans 13, all the questions, we have no questions anymore. I don't even care about the Greek word and all that. I got it. I think I know where Paul was coming from now. And I think when he was encouraging that church at Rome, I could hear them going, oh, you've got to be kidding me. He's talking about loving my neighbor, this and that. I get all that. I can work at that. But the government, the Roman Empire, the government, really? I had read something. I wished I don't remember where I read it because I read stuff. And they were talking about during the first few hundred years, a little bit what we were talking about last week, the Roman Empire, and saying how the Roman Empire, as the Roman Empire was declining, the Christian church was growing, even though they were wiping them out, and they were growing. And the guy who wrote the article was saying part of that equation of the Roman Empire falling while the church was rising was that there was a lot of disease. It wasn't like today. You go to the doctor like we've been talking about. There was a lot of disease. If you got sick, you died. The Romans, because we're talking about citizenship, of this world or of heaven. The Romans, when somebody got sick, they deserted them. They let them die because they didn't want to die. Well, they ended up dying anyway because there were plagues that they were experiencing. But the Christians were there too. The difference was the Christians didn't desert each other. And he's, in his article, like he was saying, I am not implying that a Christian never died of a disease. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is they didn't desert each other. When they were hit with a disease, they helped each other. And the ones who lived through it, you know this better than I do about immunization systems, and you become immune to something, and they were able to help people. And all they were really doing, it's not scientific, it's spiritual. They would not desert each other. They would take care of each other through illness. They didn't know that they were becoming immune. They wouldn't have even had terminology for that. All they knew was that because they didn't desert each other, those who lived through it were able to help each other because they were following a principle that God gave us to care for one another. Where the Roman Empire was deserting each other, dropping like flies.
Right.
What kind of a person ought we to be?